right. All right. We are live once again. I have a pleasure of having David Denton on as a guest tonight. Real quickly, want to read something off that David has enjoyed careers in education, K through 12. He's been in the senior living industry on the independent, assisted, and memory care side. He's been involved in financial services, insurance, annuities, and retirement planning. David's focus has always been on building and maintaining strong relationships in order to accomplish large, meaningful goals that are generally beyond the reach of individuals acting alone, which I love that. So, with that said, let me bring David on. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you, Mark. It's good to be here.
It's good to have you. So, how's your day been?
I've had an awesome day.
No
Absolutely
complaints.
awesome day. No
No complaints,
complaints.
huh?
Wouldn't matter if I did. It wouldn't change
Yeah,
anything.
well,
But
we could share some stuff back and forth. Like you said, I don't think nobody cares. But let's kick it off, David. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
well, as you said, I started out in education. I was in education in religious schools, parochial schools, for over 22 years. I taught English, Bible, and history. And for most of that time, I also doubled as the principal for K through
Oh, wow.
12.
Okay.
That's what you do in small schools. And I enjoyed it, but I did get burned out a little bit, and had the opportunity in around 2016 to move into senior living. And I thought, man, here's something that I can do that's completely different from education. I can spread my wings, try something new. Mark, it turns out it's still parents and their kids. It's just the roles are reversed. Now, instead of the parents wanting to know why you're picking on Johnny, Johnny wants to know why you're not taking care of mom.
Man, that is so true. I live in that myself with my parents and family. It is quite the experience, to say the least. And I know you have seen all types of family dynamics come through there, being in that field yourself. How did you get involved? What came about that made you wink that way to get into in the senior living
So
space?
actually, when I left education, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. It's one of those things where you just foolishly decide to leave a job and you don't have something else lined up yet. But I had a friend that I actually knew ever since high school, and he had gone into the senior living healthcare realm. And when he found out that I had left education, he told my sister to tell me to give him a call. And he got me an interview with Brookdale, and
Mm,
through all 5 levels of interviews there, the longest, most extensive set of interviews I've ever been through.
really?
And yeah, they gave me a training wheels community with 53 beds here in
Mm,
Noonan. And that's how I kind of dove head in, kind of dived in the deep end.
wow. And what was the total time you were in that space? How many different
Uh,
communities?
yeah, well, I've served in one, two, three, four, five different communities. I took some time off to do start my own business as an insurance and retirement
Mm,
planning person, which I did up until COVID hit, and then that dried up, and my wife wanted a regular paycheck, which I can't blame her. So in the heart of COVID, I went back to the senior living industry, and let me tell you, it was a nightmare. But
wow.
all altogether, probably 6 or 7 years in senior living.
Yeah, you jumped into the fire with that because it was kind of figuring out as things went along, because it was quite the horrible situation, not just in the senior space, but in everywhere. I mean, everything.
No,
And
I'm sorry, no one in senior living obviously had faced anything like this before.
yeah,
And the community I took over was the first community to have a COVID
mm,
case,
wow,
and in this company that I worked for, and they were also the hardest hit. I think during the course of the first year, we lost 20 residents, mostly in memory care. So
wow.
it was almost PTSD inducing for my staff.
Yeah, I'm gonna shelve that right now because I want to get into that. I want to get into that conversation a little bit further, but I got a few more things to go through. I think it's going to be a very important topic and an important topic as well. You kind of touched on it already with the roles reversing with kids, family, whatever. But in what ways and serving seniors did different in other areas working in the school environment?
So the schools I worked in were nonprofit.
Okay.
So, I mean, we had to balance a budget, but there was always a church organization that could bail us out if we had to have it. And the emphasis was more on providing the educational services to the family, regardless of income.
Mm-hmm.
In the senior living industry, those communities and companies were decidedly for profit.
Okay.
And the emphasis was it was just completely different than anything I had been used to before. So
Yeah.
that's probably the single biggest difference. The second one would be I was much more under the thumb of government regulating
Mm.
agencies in senior living than I was in education. So a
Okay.
lot more of that.
Yeah. And I guess with the family dynamics of instead of it being a, a kid getting in trouble and having the parents come to the principal's office, you're having the adult children come and talk about their uh, differences of views and situations that went on with their parents being taken care of. Um, in your role as an administrator of the different senior living communities, so what have you seen? I know we touched on it being uh, COVID, but what were some of the other major challenges that was facing the industry?
Well, now right now, there's a great shaking really that's going on in the industry, and there are a lot of senior living corporations, companies that are probably going to bow out. They'll sell their
Mm,
buildings off because the competition is tremendously fierce right now, and it's happening across the country, and it's happening to uh, pretty much all of the operators.
mm,
Um, you know, the biggest challenge for this is a few years ago, speculators and investors kind of targeted baby boomers and their care as a prime investment opportunity. And so people started building and or buying up senior living communities, not because they had a mission for taking care of seniors, but because it seemed like a gold mine,
mm.
something that was only going to be more and more needed as, you know, as time went on, as these boomers aged and retired, et cetera. And so there's a glut of communities and buildings in the market. That's one. And then two, many, if not most, of these communities are owned by investors and speculators who are really focused on turning a profit, operating the community for a short while, and then trying to sell it at a large return. So they'll do whatever they can to fill it up and make show good return on the balance sheet, and then use that to attract another investor or buyer to come in, or a bank to provide more money in the form of a loan that they can use to build more communities.
Yeah,
That creates quite a challenge because that is sort of diametrically opposed to good care, as you
yeah,
can imagine.
yeah. And it's also the other um, torpedo in the ship, so to speak, was uh, when they entered into some of these investments and no one really saw the rate increase, and the commercial side got really spanked. So now a lot of those notes are coming due. A lot of the banks are not wanting to renew, or if they do, they're not wanting to renew, of course, at the lower rates because they kind of rode that low rate wave. And they're already on such tight margins that it's even bringing in more pressure. So you're seeing bankruptcies and all that. But again, at the end of the day, they didn't get into it. A lot of them didn't get into it for the right reasons. It was just a hedge fund, spreadsheet, bottom number projections. And when they come in there and numbers aren't hitting what they want, let's cut the cost, and it's cut in the areas that are most important of it all. But I think that gets off to the importance and the challenges of needing more private care homes, but vetting those of having the people doing it the right way with the right approach, and not being the lower end side of taking advantage of people and their Social Security checks and all that. So
Right.
that's its own bag of goodies to work through there. But we're already touching on it, but how have those challenges impacted the care and programming for the seniors who are part of these communities and kind of get caught up in the wake of it all? We've seen several communities being sold and management changing and ownership changing. And some of the communities are saying, hey, we don't want to deal with these people that have a lot of problems. We want to lean more to light assisted living and maybe independent. So families are having to relocate their loved ones because new ownership's going, we don't want to deal with that heavy assisted living and memory care stuff.
So, yeah, that's an excellent point. More and more communities are turning away residents with a high level of need because they're not profit makers. So where do they go? Well, nursing home is the option, and that's not always or usually a desirable place. I would say where it impacts them the most, though, is the day to day. If I'm a community and what I care about is maximizing my profit, I'm going to charge my residents as much as I can conceivably charge them. I'm going to turn around and pay my staff as little as I can conceivably pay them. And it's always a balancing act because that creates staffing shortages when people can go to McDonald's or Walmart or someplace that's not nearly as life, what's the word? You're responsible for the lives of these people. So you go to McDonald's where you're not really, or
Yeah.
Walmart where you stack shelves and get paid the same or more money.
Mm.
That drive to maximize profits can create lower staff to actually service. I don't know any place that actually operates with fewer staff than the state requires.
Mm.
They would get spanked pretty quickly. But most companies actually have a minimum that's higher than the state minimum, and they don't always honor that.
Yeah.
And it's worth pointing out, most of these communities are owned by an investment group and they're managed by a senior living management company. The senior living
Mm-hmm.
management company understands the industry. The investment group doesn't. And the investment group will pass down instructions to the management group to maximize profits. They'll tell them to do certain things. And then the management group and the executive director and the nurse and the people in the community, they're all kind of caught in the middle between what they know they need to do for the residents and what the mandate is from the company that actually
Mm.
owns the building.
Yeah.
So care in the form of reduced staffing and poor morale. If you raise, and I saw this happen once, you raise rates, your annual rate increase of 9 or 10% on the residents, you turn around and give a pay raise of 2 to 3% to your staff.
Mm.
They see that,
Yeah.
and it's not good for morale, and more people quit, or the care maybe suffers a little bit because of morale. So that's probably the single biggest challenge
Yeah.
facing the larger corporations.
Well, and Jeff and I talk a lot about, and it's true. It's a fact of the situation. We'll develop relationships with executive directors, marketing directors, et cetera. And 2 months later, they're gone somewhere else. And then you follow them there. And sometimes you can't really necessarily recommend placing people there because it's not them, it's the community that's cut things too far. And, obviously it's our objective and goal to take care of these families and do what's best and what we would want to do with our own family members. So it creates quite the challenge per se, but kind of getting off in the direction that we were touching on earlier. And we both understand not everybody are believers. There's different people, I guess forms of faith or whatever, but I myself, I work on my faith and believing that there is one God and Jesus is the way. Some people smirk at that, but it doesn't change the fact that the virtues of that brings nothing but goodness. If you look at that side of it, just look at it being with love. So with that said, in what ways would you say people of faith can help address the issues that you've mentioned and we've talked about? like you had mentioned earlier, that community getting hit hard by COVID, and you're going into work. We're dealing with our own personal lives, trying to navigate what in the world is going on. Because at the very beginning, before it all kind of started coming to the truth of what actually was possibly happening, it's like you want to run through the grocery store holding your breath because you felt like it was just there waiting to jump on you. And then they shut down the communities. Families are having to come and look through the window like they're at a zoo. Just insanity. And then you having all those seniors, especially in memory care, that passed away. And even though there's a lot of relationships that are developed from staff to residents. So what would be some of the things that faith helped those, and maybe the ones that didn't have faith, how different it was for them?
So, first, I want to give the caveat that nothing I say is meant to imply in any way that someone who's not a Christian or practicing Muslim or whatever faith is not compassionate or caring. Obviously,
Correct.
we're compassionate, caring people everywhere. I'm
Correct.
speaking now in generalities of
Yeah.
what I've seen. Speaking specifically about COVID, and then I'll broaden it to talk about the senior care industry in general. The community that I took over shortly after COVID kind of hit was very hard hit. And you remember the early days, no one really knew, what the ramifications were. For all
Mm.
you knew, you were taking your life in your hands to be in the same room. And remember, the guidelines changed almost daily
Yeah.
from because we didn't know, and yet these care staff, the nurses, the directors, all these people that worked in these communities, they were setting up cots, in the memory care unit and spending the night
Wow.
because they were so short. People were quitting right and left because they were scared, and the people that kind of had more of a mission mindset would work double shifts, set up cots. It was really one of the most amazing things that I've been witness to. And a lot of that was driven by a faith that informed their behavior, that said these people are valuable and they need care. And right
Mm.
now, that care has to come before my desire to go home or whatever.
Yeah.
So that specifically for COVID, I can say that I definitely saw that a lot. But in general, more in general than anything, if you are a person of faith, kind of part and parcel of that is it creates in you a service mentality, an idea of being mission driven. I'm not here just for myself, and that would kind of bleed out into the job. I'm not doing this job just for a paycheck. These I love these people. These are my grandmas and my grandpas and my moms and my dads and whatever, and they need to be taken care of. And going into the job and going through the day with that mentality, it seemed to me that those staff members who were operating out of a faith mindset kind of were impacted by the stress less severely than others were. They were able to cope better. They were able to maintain their equilibrium better, and in by doing that, they were able to provide better care and to be encouraging to the residents who, I don't mind telling you, they were very fearful. Family members were fearful and angry because they couldn't see their family members. The family members in the community, the residents, there might have been a little angst and anger there, but they were afraid.
Mm.
And being able to comfort them and be present with them and interact with them and provide programming to the best of your ability when they for a long time they weren't allowed together. And so our activity director and our care staff and myself and others, we would actually take the programming to them up and down the hallways, singing, going into rooms and reading to them, playing games in the doorways. All of that was kind of driven by the sense of mission that uh, faith outlook, I think, provides you more than anything else.
Well, like you were saying, there's a deeper purpose behind it. Like you had mentioned, it's not just about the paycheck, even though you're there for a paycheck. That's the common denominator. Being in this industry is I've met some of the most wonderful people that has the right heart, the right empathy, compassion, and that's what gets, and not to beat up all of the communities. I don't mean for it to be that way, but when you sit there and you hear stories like that, and you've experienced it and lived it and done it, and that's what's making these doors stay open. And then you've got the bean counters that they aren't up there sleeping on a cot. They're not invested into those families and those elderly, you know, people. And it sort of becomes insulting when, hey, did you, you got, it's end of the month, fill the rooms, and you're they don't even pay attention to that side of it. But on that topic, share some examples of how your faith helped you personally as you were being an executive director, because you were kind of having to oversee the place.
So I want to piggy real quick. I'll pivot to that, but I want to just touch base with what you said. I want to make it clear that the issues that the senior living industry are facing are really more than anything else systemic issues. Um, you know, there are bean counters, and boy, let me tell you, they frustrated me no end sometimes.
Mm.
But their mission, they didn't get into their financial controller position or whatever to take care of seniors. And it was never going to be
True,
their mission. They got into
true.
it to help those companies make money for their investors, some of
Mm.
which are your and my retirement plans and those kinds of
Yeah.
things. Completely different calling. We've got to find out a way, better minds than mine need to find a way to marry the two better. One way is, kind of focusing on the smaller private family run communities. I'll talk more about that later, but I don't mean to ever imply that even the people in the C-suite in these corporations are evil. Different
Mm.
mission. And
That's a very, very good point. That is such a nice observation, and I like the way you explained it, because it's true, and it's easy to miss sight of that. They're just doing their job, so it doesn't mean they're evil, but it's easy to kind of categorize it that way when you're on the emotional side, trying
that's
to
right.
do the right thing for people and families. But I think you hit it square on the head. Of that might be an important uh, way of maybe trying to stimulate and approach something, and getting in front of some of the owners, and have a different meeting of the minds, and go, hey, understanding both sides of it. I think each side needs to understand the other side,
Yeah,
and try to find a happy medium or whatever, because at the end of the day, it's the families that's what's important
that's right.
uh,
The family.
of that. But back to the some of your personal experiences being in that heavy role of being an ED, how you personally was impacted and helped.
So my core philosophy has always been relationship based, as you mentioned at the top. My faith in Christ is predicated upon the idea that God created us not so he'd have someone to obey his commandments, but so that he could have a
Mm,
relationship with us. Relationship is paramount. And, translating that to the human realm and the positions that I was in when I was a principal and a teacher. I had a terrible school experience. I was a terrible student. I failed the ninth grade twice. I had no relationship with my teachers up until about the 10th or 11th grade when I changed schools and found some really godly teachers. And most of the principals that I interacted with were just a cipher as far as I was concerned. I had no
mm,
relationship, had no idea that they cared for me at all. And when I became a principal and teacher, that was my mantra. These kids are going to know that I care about them, even if I'm
mm.
yelling at them, even if I'm scolding them. I want to be the principal that kids come to your office willingly. And I wasn't above putting candy bowl out so that it would bribe them to come in and we just chat.
Yeah.
So that's probably number one. And that translated to the senior living. When I got involved in it, there were residents that were just a pain. And
Mm,
by the time I got to a community, the people that worked there were like, I don't even want to talk to her. I
yeah.
can't be around him. He just makes me so mad. David, you take care of it. And I made it my mission to kind of redeem the relationship, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
that involved a lot of sitting down and talking, asking questions, and probably most important, acknowledging when they had a legitimate complaint and trying to do something about it.
Mm,
And all of that approach was driven, I believe, by my faith. This person
mm.
matters. This
Yeah.
person is God's child, and I either need to address their complaint by solving it, by being honest and saying it's a legitimate complaint, but there's really nothing I can do, or because I developed a trust relationship with them, sometimes I was able to tell them, you know what, Mrs. Johnson or whoever, that's not a legitimate complaint. Come on, let's move
Yeah.
on. And they would
Yeah.
take it.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
always valued
That's
that.
that. That's good. This is going to be an interesting question because obviously this is something maybe I would be asked or Jeff would be asked, but I'd be curious from your side of it. What would you say to those that may be looking into senior care options for their loved ones?
So I would say that the senior care industry, especially assisted living, and even doubly, especially memory care, is vital for our senior populations. And the beauty of that industry is that there's a place for seniors to go when it's not appropriate or safe for them to stay at home. And when they don't have a family member who is able to care for them for whatever reason, um, or don't have family members at all for that matter. So senior care and senior communities are vital and they're necessary. I would say to anyone that's out there that's looking into it, take advantage of neutral third parties who provide services, Mark, like you and Jeff do. It's
Mm,
tremendous service. Utilize that service. Um, I would, if it were up to me and I was just speaking generically, I would urge folks, if they're looking for a safer place to send put their loved one, to look closely at the non-corporate communities, the smaller private ones,
mhm,
because those tend to be operated out of a sense of mission.
mhm,
And I don't know if the law has changed, but it used to be if you had 25 beds, you came under state guidelines. So I would look
mhm,
for, a community that's operating at least 25 beds, so there's state oversight,
mm.
and but that is privately held. And I would interview the owner.
Yeah.
I would ask them, are you going to sell this community? Or are you trying to turn a quick buck? What's your plan? Now, no matter
Doesn't
what
mean
they
you'll
tell
say,
you,
yeah, yeah.
things can change, but it's at least a question worth asking. But from my experience, most of those, uh, the people running them are running them and they're content with whatever return they're getting on month to month basis. And it's more personal, greater access to the decision makers. That's where I would start. Doesn't
Yeah.
mean that places like Brookdale or some of the larger places don't provide good care. They do. And Brookdale, many of their communities they own outright. Some others they manage. I would ask that question because, and this is important, if you're going to a community where the people who operate the community are actually managing it for an
Mm,
investment group, they don't get the last say, no matter what their big words are, and no matter how great it sounds. At any moment, the investment group can come in and say, as happened to me when we went through a transition in a community, we're going to double or triple the rates
mm,
immediately. And there's nothing the management group can do because they
mm.
serve at the pleasure of the investment group. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say. Um, One last thing, and this is kind of a little thing, but go into the community unannounced
Yeah. Yeah.
first. Before you do
Yep.
anything else, just walk in and ask to speak to the marketing director. And while you're waiting, walk around. Are the
Yeah.
residents smiling? Are they clean? Are the
In
staff
the
smiling?
rooms, is anybody out?
That's exactly right. Are the staff smiling, and do they on their own say hi to you?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That the measure of the morale of a community can be
Is
measured
the
within the
staff.
first few minutes that you're in there. If they're
Absolutely.
sullen or they're avoiding you, you're going to want to go somewhere else.
Let me ask you this. This is a question that just popped into my head, and you're
Uh-oh.
you're gonna be the perfect person to ask because when we sit here and we're trying to find the right community for a loved one. So we did a pre-assessment, and as you know, not all communities are the same. Not all pricing is the same. You've got all inclusive. You got others that have care levels, etc. The staffing, the way they treat people, the nurse on staff, on and on it goes. No one really, is this true? Is this a true statement? No one the residents there don't really care about the swimming pool and the theater room and all the little bells and whistles. And that's seems to be more for the children, the adult children that are looking for their loved one, because you don't really see anybody swimming in the pools, no matter which ones I go to. No one's swimming in the pool. They're not watching movies in the, because everybody can get a big screen TV themselves and stick it in their room. So would that make sense to maybe try to, when they're building these new ones or when they come in and take over and renovate, let the money go to somewhere else instead of pool maintenance? And
So here's what I will say. They're not going to go to those places on their own. This is a little stereotypical, but it's based on my experience. There is a lot of inertia in any given senior. They know what they like. They've got their routine, and it's difficult for them to shake themselves out of it, much less have someone else. But I've been in communities where a really strong programming director developed a really strong relationship with the residents, and just because he or she said this would be exciting, they have a track record, they could get some participation. So if you have a pool, no one's going to go down there by themselves. But if you
okay,
schedule a monthly pool party, and make it worthwhile with maybe some beverages and some entertainment, they absolutely will come.
okay,
And the pool is sort of a prop. They may or
yeah,
may not get into the pool, but they'll come. Movie nights that are engaging, like you wouldn't necessarily do the Rocky Horror Picture Show, but that kind of idea where it's kind of interactive, fun
yeah.
activity, that's where that becomes really valuable and builds community, which is what those things are all for. But your central point
Is the
is
activities director putting it together to make it usable?
having a culture there where in an environment where it's the norm. Your central point, though, that those things are basically more for the family than the residents is true. Real quick story. When I was at Brookdale, that at Noonan, that community has no exercise room. It has no movie theater. It's small. Uh, the amenities are not great. You know, but when I started there, the census was over 95%. When I left 3 years later, it was over 95%.
Wow.
And
Mm,
I remember asking a family member at our Thanksgiving meal, which was the highlight of the year. Um, they had put their mom at Brookdale Noonan, and I remember asking him because I wanted to know. Remember, I'm new to this industry, and I was a little insecure about the fact that we didn't have the stuff that the fancier
mm,
places, especially in Peachtree City, had. And I remember asking him, what made you choose Noonan? Brookdale Noonan over some of these other ones, these bigger ones with all these amenities. He looked at me and said, David, when we walked in here, there was a feel that felt like home
mm,
between the staff and the furnishings, which were a little old, a little worn, not
mm-hmm.
ugly, not broken, but
All
they had
right.
been worn. And my mom's not going to play putt putt. She's not going to go swimming. She's not going to use the bowling lane. And we wanted her to have people that she could visit with.
Mm,
And that was what made the difference. And that has stuck with me all these years.
yeah.
Again, Mark, back to relationships.
Yeah.
Relationships are key to everything.
Well, I'll quickly say this because I can't not talk about it when it comes to my mind. But that's what's really driving me crazy with my mom and dad, and trying to wrestle with my sisters and all that. And of course, I see it from the the space I come from of there's a give and take in everything. We're paying mom and dad, they're paying for 24-hour care at home. Mom's home with hospice. And I'm sitting there going, hey, number one, they're blowing through their money unnecessarily when they need social interaction. They're just sitting here rotting. And so that's what pains me greatly is I know that they would get better attention and they would be stimulated mentally and socially being in a good community. So with that said, it's a very difficult and challenging thing. Here I am in the business and I can't even get my own family to pay attention. But
Yep.
let's move on to something that I know will bring a smile to your old face. Is I know you're moving into your passion and your desire, and that's into the speaker writing arena, and a new online column you're creating. So share a little bit more about that and point us in the direction of where the column's at.
I really appreciate that. I absolutely am. As I confessed to you before we came on, I spent most of my life making a living. But even though I was working in education and then in senior living, and I could kind of pursue my passion for relationships, my gifts are communication. Um, Speaking, writing, and talking to people one on one and doing informal counseling and working with them that way. So I actually made the decision fairly recently that I was going to pursue um, a writing. I don't want to say career, but I want to be much more intentional about writing. And so I was accepted as a columnist on Pathos.com, and I do a column about twice a week. Uh, Hopefully, I can continue doing it twice a week. The column's name is "The Blessed and the Broken,"
Mm.
and you can go to Pathos and search "Blessed," "The Blessed and the Broken." You might be able to search by name as well. I don't know. I'm still new to the platform,
Okay.
so that's one. The second thing is I just started. Journey with John Maxwell and his leadership certification training that will prepare me to be a life coach
Mm.
um, and speaker. I'll be a certified Maxwell speaker and life coach. And the two arenas that I feel qualified to speak in are education and senior living.
Mm.
And to also come in and do staff development for
Oh,
employees at schools. My specialty with schools was learning styles, how kids learn, how we can focus on teaching kids the way that they learn, but then also coaching teachers who maybe felt burnt out the way that I did.
mm.
Parents are at their wits' end to know how to help their students be successful. Um, I will be offering life coaching with a focus on those three classes of people: teachers, students, and parents, and in addition to general life coaching, and then staff development for schools and for senior communities or senior companies. So
I
anyone
think
out there
that,
needs
yeah,
anyone, let me know.
I think that's really awesome that, obviously I'm coming from the experience of the communities. I think that'd be awesome for you to be able to go in there and do some coaching, mindset, mental health, all those things because of the emotions they're dealing with. How long would that process take with the John Maxwell?
Um, to know what I'm doing will take the rest of my life,
Well,
which I love.
well, I guess when do you officially get to kind of be let off the leash a little bit, if that's the right word?
All right. So there is a 3-day conference
Okay.
in Orlando that I'll be attending. At the end of that 3-day conference, I'll be certified. I'll be able to call myself certified. And at that point, then I can actually be official. Um, you know, how much I will know, that will always grow. But I feel like I combine with what I'll learn between now and then, what I learn at the conference, and what I already know about education, which is my primary field of expertise. I think I can offer something of value
You're gonna do
sooner rather than later.
fantastic. You're gonna do fantastic, and I'm happy for you. And I know it's been quite the journey. I'm sure finding your way to this, I guess path, but you're gonna do fantastic. As a matter of fact, it's like I think it's gonna be perfect.
I,
Um,
I feel that way as well.
Yeah.
I feel like I've been set free, and as I told my wife, I'm almost giddy, you know.
Well,
So
we'll share with me how it goes because I'm looking to be set free too.
yeah,
So,
find your passion,
yeah,
live into your passion.
absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we go? Anything that popped in your noodle or?
Last thing I would like to say, based on what you just said about, you'd like that too. The core impetus for this was the realization that the single most important thing in personal development is integrity. Everything else
Mm-hmm.
derives from that. And by integrity, I don't mean, always telling the truth. I mean, that's
All
a
right.
component of it. I
Yeah.
mean, kind of a synthesis between what you present to the world and what you are on the inside, that there's not a
Mm-hmm.
gap there. There's a synthesis between what you do every day and what you love to do. And
Mm.
so really what it boils down to, and what I'd encourage anybody that's on this presentation to think about doing, is pursue integrity, pursue that synchronicity between the external and the internal.
Mm.
The Bible calls it, a completeness, a oneness. When the Bible talks about be ye therefore perfect, that's what it's talking. It's not talking about no sin. It's talking about be whole,
Mm.
perfect, be complete in Christ. So everything that I'm doing is kind of born out of that new commitment, a renewed
Yeah.
commitment to living a life of personal integrity.
Yeah. And hey, if you would, one of my favorite people, Kim Poyer, is saying hello. So give her a shout out and tell her hello.
Kim, I love you. And Kim has been on my column on Pathio, so thank you for that. And look forward to seeing you hopefully sometime soon.
Kim is a sweetheart. But
She really
David,
is.
I thoroughly have enjoyed this. I want to thank you for supporting the show. And my dog is wanting off my lap. Sorry, hang on. But I really appreciate it. Maybe let's revisit and do another one after your uh, event with the training, and maybe you
Okay,
can
great.
share some of the if you're ever going to be doing any events or life coaching events. I'd like to not come out too aggressive here, but I would like to maybe think about being involved with you and maybe doing something on a show with some of the staff at some communities, and you could share some things because a lot of times it's hard for people to get away, but they can get online, and we could
That's it.
possibly do something and
Absolutely.
do some stuff online and have some events for you to do your coaching and the things not only that you learn, but the things you already know that you'll implement in the I guess techniques that you may be shown that you may not be aware of as of yet. But anyway, David, thanks a bunch. Thanks for everybody watching, and for those that stumble across this episode, even if I'm dead and gone, I hope you get something of value from this, and you can take something to heart. David has shared a lot of really good stuff. So until next time, we will see everybody later.
Thanks, Mark.